Okay, so we're back from having a break in which we enjoyed a nice meal.
Sure do.
And hopefully we can maintain our
composure,
our wakefulness and alertness to get through this presentation. Again, we're talking about the topic of discussion here is verses of the Quran, chapter 3, verses 92 and 93. There it says in English, all food was made lawful to the children of Israel before the Torah was revealed, except that which Israel forbade himself. Say, tell them, bring the Torah and read it if you're truthful. So, whoever forges a lie against Allah after this, these are the wrongdoers. So, looking at those verses, I chose to entitle my research paper, The Swine Flu. Not F-L-U, but F-L-E-W. Swine flu. And by that I want to suggest that the swine argument, that swine is unlawful, has now flown out the window. It's flown out the window. It's invalid. The swine flu. Are you trying to capture that?
Yep, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, the swine flu. And actually I can shut the argument down right away, and Shafiq brought these verses. My presentation will be pretty much like Shafiq's, I think a little more structured though.
I know, yeah.
Pretty much like this. A little more structured.
I love it. I love it.
So now, I can shut the argument down by just quoting chapter 5, verse 5, and chapter 6, verse 147. We can shut the argument down. We don't have to do none of this again. My case will be established. You see? And one verse says, today all things are made lawful for you, and the food of the people of the book is made lawful for you, and your food is made lawful for them. So I just simply have to ask the question, where in the Quran does Allah make unlawful for the people of the book the eating of pork? Where in the Quran does Allah make unlawful for the people of the book? Let's say in particular the Jews and the Christians. Where in the Quran is a verse where Allah made unlawful for them the eating of pork? So we'll establish that there's no place. So the next question becomes, who made pork unlawful? Who made pork haram? And I wanted to point out before that the word haram, you have to be careful with how it's used. You have to make sure you see the context.
Really.
Because if you look in chapter 6, verse 152, you'll see the word haram used there.
Right.
But it'll be used in two different and contradictory manners. You see?
That was 6 what?
Chapter 6, verse 152. So actually the better translation of the term haram, rather than to say unlawful, is sanction. Sanction. Because now when you use the term sanction, it covers what is lawful and what is unlawful. When you sanction something, you either make it good or you make it bad. By sanction, you see? So now if you look in that verse, you'll see chapter 6, verse 152, it says, say, come, I will recite to you what your Lord has what? Ma harama. What your Lord has harama. So you can't say what your Lord has forbidden you, because the first thing right out the gate is what your Lord has forbidden you. First of all, now, associate naught with him, okay, that's good. And then the next thing is do good to your parents. He doesn't forbid you to do good to your parents.
Right.
So, wow, God has forbidden you to do good to your parents. If haram means to forbid something, no. So, one point he showed you that what he has forbidden you, don't associate nothing with him. And the next thing it shows what he has permitted you and enjoined on you what to be good to your parents with the same term, sanction. You follow me? So now, I'm just saying that to say that you want to make sure that you look at the context of what you're reading when you use the term haram, you see? Haram. You see, just like when we talked about the beehive. That word is slung around town, and they have a whole system of laws and specifics regarding it, but nowhere in the Quran to be found. Yet people are conducting their lives, turning away from what is halal to take on this man-made concept of the beehive. Wrong? So now we don't want to have that. So we have our verses, chapter 3, verse 92, 93. So the first thing we want to see, what is it that Israel forbade themselves? What is it that Israel forbade themselves? God said all food was lawful unto Israel. So now what we're saying is that before Israel did this, all the food was lawful. All the food was lawful for them. So could we say pork?
Yes.
Pork was lawful, if that's the case, unless God has now showed us differently. But whatever it is, all that food was lawful for Israel until Israel came along and made themselves exempted for themselves certain types of food. Now, it could have been because they, like the Hindu people, they worship the cow, so they said, well, we don't eat the cow. The cow's sacred. So they don't eat the cow. Cow's holy, sacred cow, so we don't eat it. So you did that for yourself. God talks about the big benefits of the cow.
Right.
You work the cow, you get clothes from the cow, you get milk from the cow, you get food from the cow, and you don't have to hunt the cow. Look at all those benefits you get from the cow, and you don't have to go hunting for it. So Allah calls them an'am, from the same word you get ni'mah, which is favor.
Okay.
Is favor. You see? So here, what did Israel forbid themselves? Well, as Brother Shafiq pointed out in his presentation, Leviticus chapter 11, verses 1 to 8. The Lord spoke these things unto Moses and Aaron, saying unto them, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, these are the beasts which you shall eat. These are the ones you shall eat. Among the beasts that are on the earth, these are the ones you shall eat. Whatsoever part of the hoof, whatever part the hoof, you shall eat. Now we will know right away the pig parts the hoof. Right off the top. I have pictures of it right here in my notebook here. That the pig parts the hoof. Let's see if I can find it without taking too much time. Yeah, you see?
Right. Yeah.
Which one is it to the left?
Right here.
Yeah. So we see that the pig parts the hoof. So God says that's okay for you to eat. That's what he told him right there. He says, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, verse 2, these are the beasts which you shall eat among the beasts that are on the earth. Whatever parts the hoof, and is cloven footed, and cheweth the cud among the beasts, that shall ye eat. Nevertheless, these shall ye not eat of them that cheweth the cud, or them that divideth the hoof, as the camel, because he cheweth the cud, but he divided not the hoof. He is unclean to you. And verse 7, and the swine, now here's what they say, and the swine, though he divided the hoof, and be cloven footed, he meet that criteria up there, yet he cheweth not the cud, he is unclean for you. Now that's something they brought in. They brought in that, and they made it unlawful for them. You see, they brought that condition in, and made what was lawful unlawful, putting that condition in for themselves. You see, of their flesh you shall not eat, and their carcasses shall you not touch, they are unclean to you. Now we said, note that verse 7 supports the Quran in qualifying the swine or the pig as a domesticated animal, like cattle or so forth, because they have the cloven hoof. And that word is bahimatun an'am in the Arabic. You see, that's a domesticated animal. That's in chapter 5, verse 1, chapter 6, verse 143. So they have agreed already with the Quran, but they threw that little catch in there, he chewed not the cud, so we don't want to eat them. That's, they made it unlawful with that. Allah didn't make that criteria for them. You see?
But you saying verse 7 here is what they threw in for themselves?
Yeah, they put the thing in there. They said, and the swine, though he divide the hoof, like what it said up there, said, whatever part of the hoof and cloven footed, you shall eat it. That's what they said up there, verse 3.
Right,
But they come and say, even though that's the case, he don't chew the hook. Don't want that.
So this would be like
You see?
what you would call an addition, like when they write the book with their own hands, so to speak?
Whatever you like to say. I'm saying they invented it for themselves. Whether they wrote it or it was oral law or what, I don't know.
Right.
They had two different laws, written and oral.
Right.
So that's not my issue. My issue is not that. God said what they made unlawful for themselves. We see that the only thing was the cloven foot, and that's what it was. That's what agrees with the Quranic concept of Bahimatun Anam. You see? So they threw in the little thing that, well, it's okay, but they don't do it, so we won't eat it. They made it unlawful based on that condition. That's the point. We don't want to know what was in their mind, why they did it, and whether they said it or
No,
wrote
I
it.
just I wanted to know.
But it don't make no difference for that. You know what I mean? Now, if you look at the term swine, so I went to a dictionary, a biblical dictionary, Hastings, by the way. James Hastings Dictionary of the Bible, page 943, and it got the definition swine. And it's almost like what we say, khinzir. Domesticated swine. Domesticated swine. They said domesticated swine were probably kept in the East in the earliest history of times, historic times rather, when they appeared to have been regarded as sacred. They were regarded as sacred swine. They were like the Hindu with the cow.
Interesting.
They were regarded as sacred. In a cave associated with the earliest place of sacrifice at ancient Gezer, a G-E-Z-E-R, I don't know if that's like Gaza now, in use certainly before 2000 BC. Large quantities of pig bones were found, 2000 BC. It was the sacrosanct character of swine that lay at the root of this prohibition in Leviticus chapter 11, verse 7. 11, verse 7. You see, because they thought the swine was sacred. You see, the early ancient Jews. You see? And in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 8. And the eating of the swine flesh and offering of swine blood in Isaiah chapter 65, verse 4, 66, 3, and 17 are clearly regarded as a sign of lapse into paganism, you see. Because they're thinking that it was holy and sacred, and if you eat it, you become a pagan, so stay away from it. And so they go right on to deal with that. Now I notice something extra, different here, interesting here. It says in modern Palestine, very much the same feeling survives. Khinzir, pig, is a common but very appropriate, right?
Yeah, appropriate. That means like cursed.
Appellation.
Name.
So I said, wow, that's a funny word. Let me look it up.
Name. Cursed.
Yeah. So it says
Name.
disgraceful, shameful, synonymous with shameful, abusive, disgraceful, ignominious, scurrilous. You see, use of conduct or character deserving of bringing disgrace or shame. So it goes to the point where the Quran talks about Allah made them apes and swine.
Right.
Their character. This term is used. Swine is used for a person's character as well. Like the Quran says, oh, I made them apes and swine.
Right.
He didn't turn them into actual swine because after that they started calling on God. They wasn't pigs. You see? So I thought that was very interesting to note in that presentation as well. Now, okay, so we see what Israel made unlawful for themselves in Leviticus. Now we look at chapter 4, verse 160. So God says there, so for the iniquity of the Jews, we forbade them the good things which had been made lawful for them, and for their hindering many people from Allah's way. So now we see that this was a punishment that God is punishing the Jews for forbidding them things. There's certain things like you tell your children. I say, okay, I tell you what, you didn't do your homework, and you keep coming home late. No television, no Xbox. Put all that stuff down. It was lawful for you to do, but now you can't do it anymore. Why? Because you've been disobedient. You've not been listening and all that. So for 2 weeks, none of that. No. Can I go outside and nothing? Just stay in your room, do your homework, and I'll check on you. Once you approve yourself, then I'll return those things to you. So God says, for their iniquity of the Jews, we forbade them, harama, we made haram for them, the good things which have been made lawful for them. Those good things that were made lawful for you, we made it unlawful for you. It was lawful for you. But because you were disobedient, we took it away from you. You're on punishment now. And for their hindering people from God's way. You see, making up these rules and regulations is hard. People say, look, I'll tell you what, I don't get down with that. That's too hard, that's too difficult, too complicated. Like the Muslims do right now. Telling women you got to cover your head and your butt and all this body, and you got to walk with your head down, and you got to wear black, and you got to wear sleeves, and you can't look around, you can't do this, and the men, they got to do this. All these complications that God has not sanctioned for anybody. So you're hindering people from God's way. Wrong? Same thing that the Jews do. You see, they got this black on and this kind of stuff, and that's what they're into. Same kind of religious tradition, fervor that God has not sanctioned for them. So now, look in chapter 16, verse 118. Chapter 16, verse 118, after we see now that God forbade them because of a restriction of punishment that he put on them for their disobedience. Chapter 16, verse 118. And to those who are Jews, we prohibited. You see? Haramna. We made unlawful for them. What we have related to you already. And we did them no wrong, but they wronged themselves. You see? So here God says we prohibited them what we related to you already. You see, now this is in chapter 16, verse 118. So if you look already, it's already been announced to you. So where's that that God had already made prohibited? Where can we find that? So we have to go look in chapter 6, verse 147. Six 147. So it says, and to those who were Jews, we prohibited what we have already related to thee already. So let's see what God prohibited to them. Chapter 6, verse 147. And to those who are Jews, pay careful attention now, because we're looking to see if pork is in here. Pork. Because just now in chapter 16, verse 118, God says, look, and to those who are Jews, we prohibited what we had already related to you. And we didn't wrong them, but they wronged themselves. And in verse 4, 160, we had already read, God says, for their iniquity, we forbade them the good things that were lawful for them. So now God is telling us now what actually he forbade them. Let's see if we can find pork in here. Look carefully. We don't want to overlook it. Chapter 6, verse 147. And to those who are Jews, we forbade. Haramna, the same word that's up there in chapter 16, verse 118. The same identical word. You see it right here, right?
Yes.
Good. Same spelling, same everything. And to those who are Jews, we forbade. Every animal having claws. Every animal that has claws. Claws, not hoofs. Claws, like an eagle or something, you see.
Oh, I see.
And now of the oxen, and of the sheep, we forbade them the fat thereof. Not you can eat the ox, not the fat thereof. You can't eat the fat of the oxen and of the sheep. You can't eat the fat. You see, like in the South, I don't know if you're familiar with the South. They kill the pigs, and they have the fat. They call it crackling.
Mm-hmm.
Crackling.
Right.
You see, and they fry it up and all that. They make the grease out of it and all that. But they have it. They call it, that's the fat.
Right.
So the Jews was forbidden the fat of the oxen and of the sheep, except God is giving you a break now, even with that. He said, except such as was on their backs or the entrails, or what was mixed with bones. In other words, if you got some bone, there's a little fat still on it, you can't get it off, so okay, don't worry about that a little bit. Something on the back, like we used to buy back in the day, chicken backs. Chicken backs was a good little cheap meal.
Yeah.
And there's a little fat on the back, so you don't worry about that. No, just don't eat the big glob of fat, but scrape it off as much as you can. A little lip, don't worry about that. So still got some fat on it, so don't worry about that. You see? This was a punishment we gave on account of their rebellion, and we are surely truthful. Now there it is. There it is. That's what was forbidden to Israel. It was lawful before, but God forbade them that now. All food was lawful for them, except what we made unlawful for them. So we have to include the pig in that lawful, because God he said all food. Pig is food, right? Except what we made unlawful. We don't see no pig here, do we?
No.
Okay, so we're just going by what we see.
Right.
We're not talking about the Muslims now. We're not talking about the Muslims in the Quran said don't eat this, no, that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the Jews. Okay? 2776. Shafiq brought this verse wisely as well. 2776. Surely this Quran declares to the children of Israel most of that wherein they differ. You see? Because you got a problem and all that about this and that, so the Quran is coming to tell you now, look, we forbade you that and all that, but not all that stuff you talking. You see? But you don't accept it, so that's why you're still in the schism that you're in. Now, so there we have it. Now the next heading here is meat of the Christians and the Jews, lawful or unlawful. That's what we want to see now. The meat of the Christians and the Jews, lawful or unlawful. Chapter 5, verse 4. Chapter 5, verse 4. They ask you as to what is uhila. What is lawful? They asking you. Allah says they ask you. They ask the prophet, what is lawful? What is lawful to them? Say, tell them. Don't you go running off at the mouth and talk them, well, we eat the desert rat, and you can have the desert rat, and you've been eating the camel skin, and boom. No, don't you start talking about what your ancestors been eating and what you eat. God is going to tell you what to tell them to eat. You see? Say, you don't have nothing to say about what you used to eat. I was raised on this. We don't care what you was raised on. God is going to tell you what to say. They ask you to say. And now, the next verse, chapter 5, verse 5. Look at that. This day all good is lawful, allowed to you. This day, all good things are allowed to you. You see? All good things are allowed to you. What is the word for good things?
Now,
Taib.
Taib. And what is the word for allowed to you? Halal, right?
Halal.
Right. And the food, the ta'am, the food of those who have been given the book is hilun lakum, is lawful for you. And your food is hilun lahum, lawful for them. Their food is lawful for you, and your food is lawful for them. In case you got a different menu than what they got, they can eat yours, and if they got a different, you can eat theirs.
Case closed down.
This day.
Right.
This day.
Right.
This day. Never mind the days before. We're talking about from this point on.
Right.
You see? We're not talking about now the Arabs and the Muslims and all that. We're not talking about their food necessarily now, identifying what it is.
Right.
We identified what their food was.
Right.
It was lawful, and the law made it unlawful. Now he's saying making it lawful again. Never was pork involved. Pork wasn't a matter, wasn't a question, so that remained lawful. And now stamped with the seal of lawfulness now, period. Now, note, There's no prohibited species identified in the Quran, to my knowledge. What is prohibited is unclean meat, including organs. Now, Revelation forbids you as food only. Revelation forbids you as food only. Only these things. Revelation. This is Revelation. Not Hadith and Sunnah and fiqh and tafsir books and all that kind of thing. Revelation. What your brother was talking about, that which is sent down and whatever. 6:146. Tell them, say to them, I find not in that which is revealed to me, aught forbidden, nothing haram, for an eater to eat thereof, except that it be what dies of itself. Keep that in mind now, because keep in mind the pattern here. Something that dies of itself. That's a condition, you see. It died of itself. It's not the thing, but the condition of how it demised. You see, it died of itself. Or blood poured forth. You see, blood. Or they say flesh of swine, which I'm understanding from research. Decaying flesh, rotten flesh. Now, if not, then did God overlook rotten meat? Can you eat rotten meat? Did God overlook that? He's talking about something died of itself, blood, something other than God's name. What about if I find some rotten meat, some decaying meat? Can I eat that? Oh, God, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, it's right here. You can see it. You see? Something that you see is bad. Wow, that meat don't look too good to me. That's what the word kanaza means. To see something as bad. You see? That don't look good to me. I don't buy that. Excuse me, this meat here is green on the other side. I'm sorry, throw that out. Get rid of that. For surely it is unclean, meaning filthy. Or what is a transgression, that being other than Allah's name having been invoked on it. That's a transgression. But whoever is driven to necessity, even under those conditions, not desiring to exceed the limit, then surely thy Lord is forgiving, merciful. So now, there we have it. So now, somebody might say, well, brother, there it is right there. We're not accepting your definition of khanzir, being rotten flesh and rotten meat and all that business here. We're not accepting that. I say, okay, calm down. Don't worry about that. My argument is not predicated upon that. My argument is predicated upon 5:5. God told you that told the Jews all food was lawful for them, except what they made unlawful for themselves. And then God told you, I'm going to punish you by taking some of those lawful things now and making them unlawful for you. Then I'm going to give them back to you and make them lawful again. Never is pork mentioned. And then he tells us that their food is lawful for us. That settles the case. That settles the case. Now you better get together about your understanding of khanzir.
Yeah.
In this verse, because you can't make it contradict that over there.
Right.
So you better get on board with some rotten meat or something. Otherwise you have a problem
No doubt.
that you'll never be able to solve. Now, I want to revisit 6:147, 148. I'm closing out now. And to those who are Jews, we forbade every animal having claws, and of the oxen and of the sheep, we forbade them the fat thereof, except such as was there on their backs or their entrails, or what was mixed with bones. This was a punishment we gave to them on account of their rebellion, and we are surely truthful. Now I have a whole thing laid out on the entrails and all that business there. I got the whole thing. Here's the entrails here. I did all the research on that business, what it is, what is fat and all that business. We went through in case somebody wants to call out in public and sit out and make themselves look stupid. And we got this argument here typing up. Now, verse 148. But if they give thee the lie, then say, your Lord is the Lord of all encompassing mercy, and his punishment cannot be averted from the guilty. Special note. Prior to Allah taking away clawed animals and the fat of the oxen and the sheep, as a punishment to the Jews, these things would have had to been halal. Right? Prior to Allah taking away the clawed animals, He said, you can't eat anything with clawed animals, claws. And prior to Him taking away the fat of the oxen and the fat of the sheep, prior to Him taking them away, they must have been halal, lawful. Lawful. They must have been lawful for the Jews. Otherwise, if they were already haram, how does Allah punish them? Does He make them more haram? Where is the swine or the pig haram before? Before the Quran. Where? Can you show me? Before. Does Allah, before He revealed the Quran, decree that the pig was haram? Does He? Show me. If not, which is not, then the Ayat chapter 5 verse 5 and the Ayat chapter 6 verse 147 destroy the argument that the pig, either in part or in whole, is haram for food. Ergo, the swine flu. Now, here's a warning. Chapter 16, verse 116. And utter not for what your tongues have described a lie. This is lawful, and this is unlawful. Don't you go doing that out of your own mouth, so that you forge a lie against Allah, because that's what you'll be doing. If Allah hasn't given you no sultan, meaning clear argument, which I just gave you clear argument here. If you don't have any clear argument, don't open your mouth and start saying, well, brother, that's haram, and this is what the sheikh said, and this somebody said. You see? And you forge a lie against Allah.
Right.
So that you forge a lie against Allah. Surely those who forge a lie against Allah will not prosper. They will not prosper. A little enjoyment, and for them is a painful chastisement. Yeah, they'll get it right for a while. You'll live along for a while and all that, and then after that you jam. Finally, with the term fawahish. 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 What we said is shameful and evil deeds of any sort. Fawahish. According to the Quran, fawahish in chapter 7 verse 33. Chapter 7 verse 33. According to the Quran, fawahish is haram, forbidden. The Quran, chapter 7 verse 33. Muslims believe, this is what Muslims believe. Muslims believe, the so-called Sunni Muslim crew out here, the Shiites or whoever they are, they believe that eating the meat of the pig is haram. But there's one major difference between the meat of the pigs being haram and fawahish being haram. Eating the meat of the pig is allowed in emergency circumstances. Chapter 6, verse 146. When one is forced by necessity without willful disobedience nor transgressing the limits. Chapter 2, verse 173, and chapter 16, verse 115. But fawahish are not allowed in any circumstances.
Right.
The average Muslim will not eat the meat of the pig, but will regretfully, there are a few who rarely abstain from fahish. They won't eat the pig, but you're into fahish all day long. You won't eat the pig, which Allah says you can, under circumstances, you can eat them. But fawahish, which is no good at no time, you are involved in that.
All the time.
In spite of it being haram. Indulgence in fawahish is a much bigger sin than eating the meat of the pig. Allah says indulgence in fawahish is like committing shirk. It is because the devil commands us to indulge in fawahish. The devil commands us to indulge in fawahish. In chapter 2, verse 168 to 169, the devil commands that. In chapter 2, verse 268, the devil commands that. In chapter 24, verse 21, the devil commands the fawahish. Whereas Allah forbids us to indulge in fawahish. Chapter 7, verse 28, and chapter 16, verse 90. So here, one side, you got the devil commanding us to get into fawahish, and God forbidding us.
Mm-hmm.
So when you in it, you're committing shirk because you're obeying the devil and disobeying God. So you're committing shirk when you do fawahish.
No doubt. No doubt.
When one goes after fawahish and indulges in it, that one follows in obedience to the devil instead of following in obedience to Allah. That is how one commits shirk. Case is closed.
Alhamdulillah.
Any question about that?
Alhamdulillah.
The case is made because we are allowed to eat the food of the people of the book, and nowhere ever has Allah forbidden them to eat pork. We saw what Allah says He forbade them. There's no question about it.
Right.
So now if you think that pork is khinzir, you better go and check that again, because otherwise you're going to clash with what Allah says you can eat their food, and He never forbade them the pork, okay?
That's it.
That's my finding from that.